r/Nosleep. Posted by Reddit user A_Stony_shore. The 12 Rules. Part 5. Rule 5. Always have a map. I mean that literally and figuratively. Most people don't appreciate how easy it is to get lost. Most people don't realize how lost they are in life. Others are just lost in the sauce. The point is, it's really easy. Now, one of the most basic ways not to get lost is to know where you've been, where you are, and where you think you are going. No shit, you might say. That's obvious. One might even say that's the definition of not being lost. To which I say, maybe. But if it were obvious, no one would ever veer off course, now would they? A map helps with that. Now, take my supervisor, Lee, for example. He knows exactly where he is, and exactly where he needs to go. He's not lost. His love for his son is his map, and as such, he's stuck here, in an endless search for him. He's kind of an asshole, and I trust him as far as I can throw him, but he sure as shit isn't lost. See Rule 3. Now contrast that with Sarah, our local deity. She has no clue where she's going. She can tell you where she's been, like the genealogies of Genesis, and boy, she's a boring storyteller, bless her heart. But she couldn't tell you where the fuck she is or where she's trying to go, if you get my drift. You know, figuratively. In life, no map. And then there's Mikey. Nothing figurative here, he just forgot his actual map. And we found ourselves wandering around a goddamn hellish, twisted version of reality. All because Mikey wasn't paying attention to what he was doing. Thanks, bro. Sarah, Mikey, and I had crammed into the cab of our truck, and were making the rounds for our quarterly maintenance rodeo. This required us to drive around doing basic maintenance on everything from pump stations and generators to solar collectors. It was usually boring, but not always. We plodded along northward, towards the impact ranges for the big guns, artillery, aircraft, and tanks, and then skirted those via maintenance roads. The air was still and only made the heat worse than normal, if such a thing were possible. Mirages formed in the distance and dissolved as we neared. Not all, but most. How long you've been out here, Sarah? Her brow raised.
Oh, 4 years or so. I usually move on after 7 or 10, so I have a few years left in me yet.
And before that? I pressed.
Well, I mean, she smiled sadly. I could talk endlessly about that, couldn't I?
Sure, but, I mean, where did you come from originally?
She rolled her eyes. That's hard for me to answer. I've been immortal for as long as I can remember. Not that that is an odd thing around here or anything. And I can remember a long time. I'm not sure I came from anywhere specifically. I can't be sure. Didn't have anything resembling a map you'd recognize today. Antolia, maybe. I frowned. Okay. Well, what's your earliest memory? Being awash in a light. Playing among the gods. Being abandoned, then alone. Lost. So, I wandered. I wander when I get bored, or the people I know and start to love find something odd about how I didn't age. I leave. It all ends, yet I live on. Are you like an angel or some sort of god or something? I asked. She snickered. What? No. Mikey slammed hard on the brakes. A puzzled look had crept over his face. He stepped out onto the dirt road and looked around as if confused. Hey, what's up? I called. This isn't right. We should have gotten there by now. His eyes widened in the realization of something. Oh no. He walked around to my side of the truck and reached into the glove box, searching frantically before stopping entirely. Sarah, did you happen to bring the map? No, Sarah replied slowly. Shit. Well, we definitely crossed the aperture. The what? I asked. Mikey looked around nervously. The aperture. We're in a, shall we say, a different reality. And it's dangerous, he stuttered. The map would tell us where everything is on this side, and where the aperture is at different times of the day, so we can get back without having to... Is this another one of those mess with the new guy things, or are you being serious? I pressed incredulously. Come on, really? We have to do this? You sure you checked everywhere? Check again. Do it quick. Clock's ticking. Sarah's tone silenced me and kicked Mikey back into action. Mikey tore through the cab of the truck, looking for the map. As we waited, I looked out over to the landscape, waiting for them to stop messing around. At first, I thought the heat was causing my eyes to blur, but soon it was clear that the roads and terrain features distant from us started to shift and change. The sky turned blue to dark red, and the sand to a deep orange. By the time the mountain ranges melted into sand, Sarah was fuming, and Mikey's desperation reached a profanity-laced crescendo. I guess they weren't joshing me. Well, that's great. Look at that. Time's up. Listen, Rook, never forget the map. You get lost like this, and you're in for some heartache. Normally, the aperture oscillates over the impact ranges on our side of the reality. The real, never a problem, but occasionally it drifts onto post. The good thing about the map is that it will guide you to the next exit aperture without having to go through the cantonment area, which is what we have to do now. The only other way out, through the spire. Mikey climbed back into the cab and waited for us. What is the aperture, though, really? Why is it? It's prehistory. It is a prison built long ago by the powers unknown, Mikey replied coldly. The post was no longer what I recognized. The terrain was inverted, and the dirt roads had no counterparts in the real, branched and inverted upon themselves in an endless loop, while others ended abruptly, going nowhere. Thankfully, an ominous cinder spire rose from the contaminant area, easily visible from the horizon. This structure had no worldly analog, but served as our North Star. The barren desert of the other gave way to sparse dustings of something organic infesting the dirt. I couldn't see clearly what had sped past, but I imagined it to move and pulsate like a sea of worms. The nearer we drew to the twisted center of this reality, the more abundant the fleshy infestation became. If this was a prison, what was imprisoned here? I asked. Sarah and Mikey glanced at one another. We don't know really. We just hear rumors. We drove in silence as the organic growths became more common. They grew in size from mere inches to a dozen feet or more in height, and all in instances the things moved and swayed in the absence of wind. We passed the first intersection, demarcating the contaminant area, and in the place of static patterned geometric forms of construction indicative of man, stood mute, organic, chaotic refusions of such amateur control over the world. Columns of bone branched out over the streets, while masses of wriggling, tubule-like grotesquities crunched under the tires of our truck as we sped onwards towards the base of Spire. We stopped mere feet from its trunk, and Mikey killed the engine. Well, We're gonna get our asses chewed out for losing this truck. It's my fault, obviously. I'll do the FLIPL on it. As we stepped out into the open, I could hear the throbbing of the spire, and could see the skin tense and loosen in an odd synchronization, as if it were the beating of a heart. The stench of sour bile permeated everything. Okay, let's get this over with. Sarah led the way. We moved towards a gaping 3-story gash in the trunk of the spire, brushing aside sinew and drapes of flesh. The path we followed was like an artery, with smaller branches shooting off in all directions. I could tell that ever so slightly we were going downwards deeper into the labyrinth. The further we went, the louder the rhythmic melody of this place became, to the point we could feel the reverberations in our chest and struggle to hear one another. Finally, we reached the heart, a wet, bulbous thing the size of a house. It convulsed even more rapidly the nearer we drew, as if it were excited. So what now? We have to succumb to it before we can leave. Watch. Whatever happens, follow me through. Sarah stepped towards the heart. She placed her hands on the soft, mucus-covered wall of the palpitating structure. Then she pressed her hands into it, opening a fissure. It resisted at first, but then gave way. She fell forward with a brief yelp, before being violently pulled into the fissure in the engorged organ. And then, she was gone. "All right, Rook. See you on the other side," Mikey called to me, as he too pressed his hands against the heart and penetrated it. With Mikey, however, I could hear him scream in agony, before being abruptly cut off, as he was consumed by it. I was alone, and overcome with fear of the unknown, fear of death. My inner turmoil was cut short, as movement in the dark got my attention. One of those faceless men stood a dozen meters from me. It seemed to be in as much shock by my presence as I was by its. They exist here too. Perhaps they come from here. Before I could further contemplate its being, it launched itself towards me. The featureless void where its face ought to have been became clear, and in it I saw stars, a timeless expanse. I snapped out of my awe and plunged my hands into the heart. As soon as my hands pierced it, a searing pain shot through me. Every inch of me that passed into the heart erupted into blinding, white-hot pain. My bones shattered, skin split, and fed the thing. Unimaginable agony radiated up my arms as I was sucked in. The rest of me followed as the heart pulled in with all its unimaginable strength. For the briefest of moments, I felt as if every cell, every atom was ripped from me, and at the end of it all was darkness. Nothing. That was the most surprising thing in hindsight, obviously. It was nothing. There weren't even thoughts of reflection. Just nothing, like death itself. Then at once I was conscious again, climbing out of a pit of scorching California loom, 2 pairs of hands reaching down to help me up. As they touched me, my nerves continued to scream from the pain of deconstruction. "That's 2 you owe me, Rook," she smiled. "Oh, fuck right off," I coughed. We were back where we belonged, in a nondescript section of the cantonment area. I told both Mikey and Sarah what I saw in the end. One of the faceless men. Mikey looked confused, but Sarah obviously knew more. She tightened up and averted my gaze. Later that night, when Mikey had already gone home, she finally confided in me. "Listen, Rook, the aperture isn't an intentional part of that prison. The heart was the warden, the only entrance and exit point. The faceless men were its custodians, and they followed a fugitive here. The aperture is the rip caused in that reality by something that escaped.